Okay, welcome to our first attempt at a video. We fix our own cars as we go along. We've a bit of a fleet within the family, I suppose. So to help us to run them, we sort of fix them ourselves as we go along. We just thought we'd try and share some of our knowledge or our findings, or maybe make it easier for you to understand what's going on. At the moment, we've got an Audi A7 with a wheel bearing whirring. It's deteriorating quite quickly, so we've got to change it in a hurry. I put out at the moment what we have in the way of tools that we reckon that we're going to need. So a good socket set, which will basically cover a lot of the sockets as we go along to under the calipers and things. We have a power bar, I call this, and that'll give us a bit more leverage on some of the heavier to undo nuts. And then we have the offending item, or rather the new item, to replace the offending item, which is the bearing itself. Now, looking at the bearing, it seems to be quite simple. Unlike a lot of wheel bearings on cars, this seems to be a complete concealed unit. Just take it out. You can see it's sort of a bolt-on job. It's not really going to. We're not going to be able to be moving bearings or pushing bearings in and out as you do with many cars. So this looks as though. Now I'm using the word looks very much in advance, as though it might be quite a relatively easy job, but I could be mistaken on that one. The bearing itself is there, and with it comes the replacement bolts. We don't reuse the bolts that come on the original bearing, we reuse new ones. And the first one is the central bolt, which goes into the middle of the CV joint. And the first thing that I spotted was that has a very unusually large Allen key. Now that's not something I would keep myself, so I actually borrowed one, although you may have to buy one if you can't borrow one locally. And that's the item there. So that'll go into that to undo it. And then, again, these are the 4 bolts that will hold the bearing on, and they're using a Torx type thread. And again, it's quite a large one, and you won't find it in my own set here, so I borrowed that as well. So again, you may need to either borrow or buy one of those. Buying tools is always a good idea, because as you build them up, you have them for the future, and certainly it's much cheaper than actually getting the job done by the garage. So we'll start to take the car apart now, and we'll have a little look and see what we have got to deal with. Okay, for those of you who would be very novice at this, the first thing we must do is to break the nuts on the wheel. What I will point out is that on an Audi, there's a receiver in there, and if you just use an ordinary jack, that you very often break out that receiver. There is a device like that you can get online, which is very good for jacking the car up with. It'll basically fit in and then allow you to jack it up. I'm not going to bore you with the details of taking the wheel off, so we'll move on. We'll do all this while you're not watching, and we'll resume when we get to the harder parts. Okay, this is the first nut that we're going for, which is the one with the big Allen key. This is our first attempt at taking it off. We may be able to take it off with the car in park gear, although I have a funny feeling we'll end up putting the wheel back on again and putting it back on the ground to use the ground as the stop for the actual nut. We're going to work away. I'll let you know later on how we got on and how we got it off. Okay, that didn't prove too difficult. What we did, in fact, was we actually used the brakes. We put the power bar in, and we used an extender on the power bar to give myself a good bit of leverage, and it came off relatively easily. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to loosen it a little bit, not too much, and then we're going to use a hammer to unseize the actual CV joint that's held within there, because we'll have to slide back out of it. Okay, with that now off, we need to remove the brake caliper. Now to remove the brake caliper, I'm going to take away the brake warning sensors, which involves just unprising them, using that, and that guy there, and unclipping them. So we can put that away out to the back for a moment, out of the way, so we don't break it. We then use a 21mm socket. I used the power bar because it just makes it a little bit easier. We turned the car to the right on this particular case, and we've undone the 2 bolts that hold on the caliper themselves. They're now relatively loose, and we'll undo them and take the caliper away. We might use the likes of a cable tie to hold the caliper up, so that we're not putting a strain on the rubber flexible tubes, and so that we can work away at the hub in its own right. Okay, we've taken the two bolts out from the calipers, and we want to remove the caliper now, which you can see is locked on from when it was last used. We're going to use what we call a Gunther grips here, but it's a bit of a plumber spanner, just to ease back the brake pad a little bit, to give ourselves a bit of play, and that should allow us to lift that away relatively easy, he says, like that. And now we'll use our cable tie to tie that out of the way for ourselves. Okay, now with the caliper well tied, cable tied out of our way, we've got to remove the vented disc. This involves a little Torx retainer just going in here. I haven't tried it so far, but there we are. Oh, that wasn't too hard. So just remove the retainer and take off the disc. Now I'm going to work out how to loosen that off there now, but it shouldn't be too hard, hopefully. And we'll come back to you when we have that ourselves down to the bearing, which is just behind there. Okay, taking the disc off wasn't that difficult. We just gave it a little tap, and I do mean a little tap. You don't want to be hammering the hell out of it, because you could warp the disc. Just a little tap to help it get it off that over that flange there. And now we're left with the bearing hub. Now, if you look, you see that we've got this here to go in. You can see the 4 bolts here that we're looking to try and utilize. So that would be going back on in that position, and we've got to undo these 4 bolts to get this off. Okay, we've used our Torx drive on the back to remove the 4 bolts that hold on this. The next job is to actually pull the flange and the bearing out from the hub itself. There are new belts will be supplied with the new belt, so I'm not too worried about those ones. And I'll be using a hammer to try and get it off here. You can see quite a bit of movement here, which may or may not be bearing related. Okay, leave me at it, but the object is that this must come off, and so must this bearing itself here. That's the bearing casing itself that we will be putting back on again, totally new. Okay, so we're trying to remove the flange and the bearing. So the flange is coming first. We tried with a hammer, it wasn't getting a whole lot of success there, so what we've managed to do is to put a plate in behind the wheel nuts to get it to push the flange away. So basically we're using the wheel nuts as a push system. As we go, now we're at the end of our threads there. And you can see in behind here that we've got quite a distance moved out from the flange. I'm going to continue doing that now in a minute. I'm going to do the same thing again with the bearing, with the pushing from this side with the nuts in there to push the bearing back out. So I'm going to not bore you with the details, but we're going to build it up again and do another push and hopefully get that flange out on its own. Okay, the bolts certainly work very successfully on the flange. We've now moved the bearing slightly anti-clockwise in our case, so that the nuts, or the bolt holes I should say, are no longer lined up with the original bolt holes, and so that we will be able to use the 4 points as a pushing point to push it back out evenly. It is important to say that we need to push it out evenly, not all at 1 bolt or 2 bolts, to try and get it out to come out evenly, because it's quite a fine fit, it's quite a machine fit. So we'll work away on that now, and we'll try and get ourselves down to the point of rebuild. Okay, just a little tip while we're going here. We're very big fans of copper grease here. It's great for helping you to put in nuts that are slightly seized and to stop them seizing in future. I can't recommend it enough. We're going to use it here to help us to push it, so we're not fighting against the rust. We're actually making it a very easy wind up. Okay, well, we actually couldn't get it into that one there because of the battering or the hammering of the bat. We couldn't get that bolt in, but actually when we were using the 3 points as pivots, it came out really quickly. This is literally about 60 seconds since we last recorded. It's come out very quickly and very easily for us. Thankfully, hopefully yours will be the same. Okay, to give you an idea, we're about 1 hour into the job at this stage, and we are at the point of reassembly. We're using the copper grease around that just to help us to slide that home nicely. Maybe even put a little bit around the new bearing just to help it. It'll also mean that if you have the car for a very long time and need to do the job again, it'll be much easier to do next time. I am very conscious that the manufacturers very seldom would use copper grease because they don't really want to waste the money, and they're not really repairing the cars. So there we have it. It's going back on again like that. I'm not sure that there's an upside or downside to it. And that looks like it there. That's it indeed. So that's the new part back on, and all we have to do now is screw the bolts from the rear and tighten it home nicely. And then we worry about putting in the flange at a few minutes time. Okay, we've, as we said from the picture, we have the bearing in place, and we're now putting the flange back on top. I'm actually beginning to regret I didn't actually insert the flange onto the bearing before I put it in here, using sort of the vice, as I've got a funny feeling it may be a little bit more difficult. In fact, we may even be reversing to take it all apart and to squeezing it in and the vice inside. But for the moment, I'm going to try putting on the king nut, or whatever you want to call that, onto the CV joint and try and pull it back into place. And we'll see how we get on with that, and see if we bring it in tight enough that we're happy enough with it. Okay, just to let you know that as we were in deliberation about whether we'd be able to pull it in, we did manage to pull it in using, in this case, a torque wrench, but basically it had a ratchet end of it. And I have it torqued up to 150 Newton meters there. I think it allows it actually to go a little bit further, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it off the torque wrench and give it a little bit extra, just to be sure. And at that point, we're at the point of rebuild, really, and I think it's fairly basic. I don't think you need to watch every bit of the rest of it. I hope if you do decide to do the job, it comes as relatively easy as we have found it. At the moment, we're working on an hour and 20 minutes here, and I'd say there's probably about, I will fill you in at the end of the video about exactly how long it took us, and that includes the recording. Okay, well, we're just about finished there now. Don't forget to make sure everything's really tight. The brake caliper is back on again. We had to open the pads because we had to put the brake on to start the engine, to turn the wheel here and there. Don't forget to put back on, and I haven't done it just yet, is the brake wear sensors. Really, I wouldn't classify this as a majorly difficult job for somebody who is prepared to take on a bit of a task. I wouldn't perhaps do it as your first job, but if you're used to taking things apart, certainly I didn't find this particularly difficult, and certainly well worthwhile. At the moment, they're quoting about 600-700 euros for this job. The part for me was under 100 euros, so we're at it under 2 hours. Certainly we'll have the wheel back on and everything in 2 hours, and I can't earn money that fast. Alright, so good luck with your job. I hope you have a go at it.